Today, we're going to dive into a pretty amazing medical story. It's all about the fight against a silent killer, and it features two rival surgical techniques. You've got the time-tested, old-school champion on one side and the shiny, new, high-tech challenger on the other. It's a fascinating matchup.
But first, let me ask you something. When you think about the top causes of death, things like heart disease or cancer probably come to mind. But what about the 13th leading cause of death in the US? We're talking about something responsible for roughly 15,000 deaths every single year. The answer? Well, it might just surprise you.
The condition we're talking about is an abdominal aortic aneurysm, or just AAA for short. So picture this. The aorta is like your body's main superhighway for blood, pumping it from your heart to everywhere else. An aneurysm is like a dangerous bulge in the wall of that highway, a weak spot that's ballooning out and is under serious threat of bursting. And if it does,
the results are absolutely catastrophic. If an aneurysm ruptures, the overall mortality rate is between 80 and 90%. Let that sink in, an 80 to 90% chance of death. That's exactly why finding and fixing this ticking time bomb is so incredibly important. So, the big question is, how do surgeons do it?
Well, for decades now, surgeons have had two main weapons in their arsenal. And this is really where our story of the classic champion versus the modern challenger kicks off. Two totally different ways of thinking, both aimed at fixing the exact same deadly problem.
Okay, so in one corner we have open aortic repair, or OAR. This is the classic, the gold standard that's been perfected over decades. We're talking major surgery. And in the other corner, we've got endovascular repair, or EVAR. This is the modern, high-tech, minimally invasive challenger, and it promises a much faster recovery. Now, looking at that, the choice seems like a no-brainer, right? But believe me, the full story is way more complicated than that.
for a long time, it really seemed like the rise of this new challenger was just unstoppable. I mean, the introduction of EVAR wasn't just some small update. It was a total revolution. It completely changed the game for vascular surgery.
And you can pinpoint the exact moment it all started, 1999. That's when the FDA gave the green light to the first commercial EVAR devices. It was a massive turning point, kicking off a whole new era in how these aneurysms were treated. The medical world really sat up and took notice.
And you can see why it was so appealing, right? Compared to a huge open surgery, EVAR offered a lower risk during the operation itself and got patients back on their feet and back to their normal lives way faster. For the vast majority of patients, this new challenger looked like the clear winner. And the shift was just staggering. A study looking at Medicare data between 2003 and 2013 showed that the number of open repairs plummeted by 76%. Meanwhile, EVAR procedures pretty much doubled. It really looked like the challenger had delivered a knockout blow to the champion. But here's the twist in the story. Despite the incredible rise of this new technology, the old champion wasn't down for the count, not by a long shot. In fact, in some really critical situations, the classic open repair isn't just an option, it is the only option. So this really gets us to the heart of our whole explainer today. If this minimally invasive technique is so great and so popular, why do we still absolutely need surgeons who can master this incredibly complex, old-school open procedure?
Well, the answer really comes down to its incredible versatility. Open repair is absolutely essential for patients whose anatomy is just too complex for a standard EVAR device to fit safely. It's often the better long-term bet for younger patients who need a fix that's going to last for the rest of their lives. And, so importantly, when an EVAR procedure fails, or in certain life or death emergencies, it's the open repair surgeon who gets the call to come in and perform the ultimate rescue mission.
A quote from our source material really says it all. OAR has maintained its status as the time-tested standard of care. And what that really highlights is this key idea: it's not about which surgery is better in general, but which one is the right one for that specific patient in that specific moment.
So, what does this gold standard surgery actually look like? Let's take a quick, simplified peek behind the curtain of the operating room to get a feel for the incredible art and science that goes into an open aortic repair.
The strategy actually begins before the surgeon even makes a cut. They have to decide on their approach. They can go in from the front of the abdomen, which is great for emergencies when you need to get in there fast. Or they can go in from the side, which is often a better route for more complex cases. Each choice has its own strategic advantages. When you break it down, the surgery really has 4 core steps.
First, the surgeon makes the incision to get access to the aorta. Second, and this is a really delicate part, they carefully clamp the aorta to stop the blood flow. Third, they open up that weakened aneurysm and painstakingly sew a durable synthetic tube, a graft, into place. And finally, in a really clever last step, they wrap the old original aneurysm wall around the new graft to give it an extra layer of protection. It's an incredibly intricate dance that requires just an amazing amount of skill.
So all of this brings us to a very modern kind of problem. A paradox, really. The wild success of the new, easier technology has created a totally unexpected challenge. How do we make sure we protect the craft of the old one?
So here's the issue. Because EVAR is now the go-to procedure for most cases, surgical residents today just don't get to see or do nearly as many open repairs as the surgeons before them. And this has started to raise some serious concerns. Are we going to have enough surgeons in the next generation with the high-level skills needed for those tough cases where open repair is the only hope? Some of the solutions being talked about are things like creating specialized training programs, or maybe sending all of these complex cases to a few specific, high-volume hospitals.
And that really leaves us with a huge question that goes way beyond the operating room. As technology makes more and more complex tasks easier, how do we protect those difficult, hands-on, essential skills that are our absolute last line of defense when the new tools just aren't enough? In surgery, and honestly in so many other fields, figuring out that balance between innovation and tradition, well, it's not just some academic debate. It can literally be a matter of life and death.